What is a negotiated risk agreement? The term seems to cover so many arrangements and combinations of arrangements, and one arrangement masquerading as another, and to fall under so many different names: negotiated risk, managed risk, shared responsibility, that it's almost hard to pin down what this animal is, if it is one animal instead of three different animals. The only clear part is that the concept addresses the reality that people are willing to accept some risk to live their lives on their own terms. And how do facilities deal with that? Well, on this slide, I repeat myself a bit. I say again that negotiated risk agreement as a term covers many arrangements, which could include a written record of a conversation about risk and risk reduction, or it could include a liability waiver. Those are two very different things. One seems to be friendly and the other seems to be hostile. Insofar as the agreements include a liability waiver, that part is never enforceable in a healthcare setting. So see the bottom of page 445. This is why the whole area is confusing, because, and the next bullet point, supporters of negotiated risk agreements seem to believe that they do relieve the facilities of liability. We know they seem to believe it because there are various trade handbooks that say stick one of these in your agreements and then you'll never be held liable. And then the assisted living facility has to go on and argue that it's a good thing for the residents that they have to bear all of the liability, because that means they have more freedom of choice about how they live. On the other hand, the opponents of NRAs also think that they are hidden waivers and that providers include them because they see them as waivers. But go back a couple of points to my middle bullet point. If they do include a liability waiver, that part is never enforceable. Now, mind you, putting a waiver in that isn't enforceable can benefit a nursing home or an assisted living facility, because as long as the parties believe that it is enforceable and don't go to an attorney, you get the benefit of it nevertheless. The storm case included a complete waiver of liability, so it wasn't limited to injuries caused by storm's own actions and choices. It said the resident agrees that Rockland shall not be liable to the resident for personal injuries or damage, even if resulting from the negligence of Rockland or its employees, unless resulting from its gross negligence or willful misconduct. Now, almost every court that has considered such an agreement in a healthcare contract has invalidated it, just as the storm court did here, insofar as it actually reached the question. At least in its discussion, it said it would not be valid. And there's something absurd about a general liability waiver like this on its face. The stated goal is to recognize the patient's autonomy, but why ever should that relieve the facility of all duties? Reasonable care would include having the fire alarm serviced, doing background checks on employees, making sure the entrance is clear of snow, and none of these compromise the residents' autonomy. And nor would anyone want to relieve a facility or a hotel or a school of this duty. So the whole thing, I mean, it's no wonder this sort of thing is struck down. It's just pointless, and it's a contract of adhesion as well. This New Jersey managed risk agreement is what some would call a good agreement, one that's used to identify and reduce risks, not to force residents to accept substandard care. It doesn't relieve the facility of liability at all. Instead, it's a pathway to a discussion with the resident and a negotiation about how the parties will move forward. So the idea is that a resident wants to do something dangerous, perhaps, or risky. I would have given the example of smoking in bed, but that's going to be unacceptable in any case. But say drinking or eating only Krispy Kremes, and the parties will discuss this and suggest alternatives and accommodations, and perhaps point out the risks, make sure that the resident knows them, and everything will be memorialized in a document. This is a ground plan of a particularly fancy CCRC in Costa Rica, and I think I'm revealing part of my subconscious. I think this is another slide in my series of alternatives to ending up in an American care facility. Costa Rica has become popular for retirement because it's beautiful and cheap, or at least cheaper. This particular facility, Pacific Plaza, is clearly at the high end. The blurb says that the community offers 3 independent lifestyle choices: private homes, quadplex units, and apartment homes in a resort setting, and then of course also assisted living and skilled nursing and memory care. Before you rush off to Costa Rica, most of the information I was able to find out about this Pacific Plaza was on investment sites, and I'm not 100% sure that it was actually built, but I'm sure it's marvelous. CCRCs cost a lot more money than assisted living facilities. Entrance fees can range from $100,000 to $1 million, and that's an upfront sum to prepay for care, as well as to provide the facility money to operate on. They obviously invest the money and use some of the income for operation costs. Monthly charges can range as high as $3,000 to $5,000, and they might increase as needs change, so as you move up to higher levels of care. And these fees are dependent on a variety of factors, including your health, the type of housing you choose, whether you choose to buy or rent within the facility, the number of other residents living there, and the type of service contract. And then you might incur additional fees for other options, including housekeeping, meal service, transportation, and social activities. Now, the fact that these places are extremely expensive means you will be living among rich people. I guess that's either a plus or a minus, depending on how you look at it. And they raise special concerns. Is the facility going to be around in the long run, or will it go bankrupt, in which case your money goes with it? If you decide you don't like it, you might have a great difficulty moving because of the way your money is tied up there in the facility. Will the facility have enough nursing home beds when your time comes to get nursing care? Or will it ship you off to another facility, which would sort of ruin the whole concept? And finally, will the facility raise monthly rates? Those are the financial problems. Then there are the sort of more human problems. Who decides whether it's time for a resident to move to a nursing facility part of the complex, or either from independent living or from assisted living? All right. Finally, a few words on the Fair Housing Act before you go on to the question about the last case in the readings. The assisted living facility and continuing care retirement community are also the resident's home, and therefore the resident has the protections of the Federal Fair Housing Act and also the Rehabilitation Act, which prohibits discrimination solely by reason of disability as to participation in or benefits under programs receiving federal financial assistance. That is, virtually all nursing homes and recently built assisted living communities, because they get federal assistance. Sometimes, therefore, the solution to an elder's problems is not in the Medicaid part of the code, but in the good old Fair Housing Act. And that's illustrated in the Weinstein case on page 648, which you will look at next.